Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio, and today we are talking about the Book of Boba Fett once again, and more specifically how it is really facing a very, very challenging home stretch. But before we get into it, guys, just remember that at least one of my videos every week will not be uploaded to the YouTube channel. Instead, they will remain exclusive to my BitChute and Odyssey channels. So if you are watching this on YouTube and you have not clicked the links down below in the description to follow me on either BitChute or Odyssey, why haven't you done so already? Anyway, guys, let's go ahead and get right into this before I drag this out for too long. And that is the fact that, the Book of Boba Fett faces a challenging home stretch coming from The Hollywood Reporter. With 3 episodes left, well now 2 episodes left, but this article is still very, very relevant. The Disney Plus series is shaping up to be the show fans fear The Mandalorian would become. It's past the midway point in Disney Plus' The Book of Boba Fett, and as fans head into the final 3 episodes, they might be asking themselves a difficult question. Is Lucasfilm's second live-action Star Wars series everything they'd worry the first would be? From the time The Mandalorian's title was announced in October 2018 until its debut on Disney Plus 13 months later, fans speculate about what that series would offer. Was it going to be a bounty hunter procedural or a Game of Thrones-esque epic? As more details about the project were released, the series' debt to the original Star Wars trilogy became more obvious, prompting some to wonder just how much it would center nostalgia as opposed to anything new or unexpected. What eventually arrived, of course, was a show that made multiple nods to Star Wars of the past, but took things in a different direction. Whether it was the very existence of Grogu and the cloning subplot that he drove, intermittent dives into Mandalorian lore, or simply a refusal to use pre-existing characters for anything more than a cameo, The Mandalorian felt like something new from a galaxy far, far away that had been feeling increasingly stale and repetitive on the big screen. A bullet, it seemed, had been dodged. And then Boba Fett showed up. While his appearances in The Mandalorian's second season verged on the self-indulgent, really was there any reason that he had to appear in the larger story? And I do agree with their point there. Was there any reason for Boba Fett to come into The Mandalorian whatsoever? That's the real question to get you thinking. And also at the end of the day, was there any reason for the Luke Skywalker cameo? I would argue not. Anyway, the show's strong identity based around the title character's connection with his adopted son figure and the lengths he'd go to protect him ultimately saved it from becoming fan service with little purpose beyond nostalgia. The Book of Boba Fett, however, has no such defense mechanism. The issues were telegraphed by the prologue to the series that appeared at the end of The Mandalorian's second season. In less than a minute, the viewer was given multiple visual cues to bring 1983's Return of the Jedi to mind. Whether it was Jabba the Hutt's palace on the desert planet of Tatooine, the brief return of fan-favorite minor character Bib Fortuna, Gamorrean guards, and Twi'lek dancers, or sets and shots evoking the look and feel of the opening of the original trilogy's final chapter, the message was clear. If audiences wanted the old hits one more time, then here they were, in a series centered on arguably the biggest one-hit wonder the franchise has ever produced. That teaser proved to be entirely prescient. 4 episodes in, the Book of Boba Fett has continued to focus on recreated style over substance, working Tusken Raiders, Jawas, Rodians, Wookiees, Twi'leks, familiar droids, the Rancor, some extra Hutts, and of course, the infamous Sarlacc pit into the proceedings. It even brought back Max Rebo, the blue elephantine keyboard player from Return of the Jedi, which is one of the deeper cuts one can imagine, for multiple appearances across the screen. For those who wanted to revisit childhood favorites one more time, it's mana from heaven. But for anyone wanting a show that stands on its own merits, things might be slightly less of a slam dunk. With more than half the first season finished, it should be noted that Boba Fett is an astonishingly slow show, even accounting for the dual timeline structure of the series, which has split the story between what happened before the character's appearances in The Mandalorian Season 2 and what happens after. Very little has actually been accomplished in terms of forward motion. By the time the second season of The Mandalorian ended, fans knew that Boba had survived the apparent demise in Return of the Jedi, become far more zen about things than might be assumed given his previous appearances, although no less deadly, and then taken over organized crime on Tatooine by killing Bib Fortuna and replacing him as head of what used to be Jabba the Hutt's organization. 4 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett later, and we can add the following things to that list. 1. After his escape from the Sarlacc, he was taken as a slave by Tuskens before earning their trust and respect, also being knocked out by a random Jawa like a little bitch. Number two, the Tuskens were killed by a rival gang, whom he then killed as revenge. Meanwhile, in the present day, number three, Boba is preparing to fight a rival crime syndicate who appear to be making claims to his territory. That's basically it. With the majority of the story so far either given over to fan service that goes nowhere, Jabba the Hutt's cousin appear, and it looks like they're going to demand Jabba's empire. Oh, now they're leaving because someone told them off camera that someone else once wanted the empire. But hey, we got to see some other Hutts, I guess. Or massively extended set pieces focusing on mood over plot, while simultaneously being surprisingly light on mood. Boba's vision quest in the second episode, anyone? Ultimately, more about Boba Fett has been revealed in less screen time when he was a guest star on someone else's show than he's managed in his own series. It all adds up to a show that feels uneven at best, if not outright directionless, outside of evoking nostalgia, especially compared with the narrative speed of The Mandalorian, as well as the show's desire to introduce new elements of the core mythos of the franchise as a whole. Half a season in, it's a fair question to ask, what is the Book of Boba Fett about? Given the evidence at hand, it's hard not to answer, making fans of the old films happy about seeing their old toys again. Boba Fett's final 3 episodes will air up through February 9th. Okay. But ever since this article came out, and this article only came out 3 days ago, the fifth episode came out. Now, I personally have not seen the 5th episode because I lost interest in the Book of Boba Fett immediately after the very first episode. But we have this article coming from the Hollywood Reporter still. Book of Boba Fett fans equal parts elated and baffled by latest episode, referring to episode 5. A thrilling character returns to the Disney Plus series, which some felt a strange tone with the main protagonist being upstaged. Now, I would normally say spoiler alert for this, but I personally don't give a fuck about the Book of Boba Fett, and I don't know too many people that give a fuck about the Book of Boba Fett, so who gives a fuck about spoilers? The latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett, by all social media measures, was a massive hit. In fact, a lion's share of those posting about the episode commented that it was the most enjoyable of the season thus far. And that also seemed to be an issue which they wrestled with. None other than Din Djarin, Pedro Pascal, the Mandalorian himself, made an appearance in the spin-off Disney Plus series. See, that's why people were ecstatic. They were not ecstatic that it was Boba Fett. They were ecstatic that, that Mando finally came into the show. Well, he made far more than just an appearance, as the entire episode focused on Mando. So you had an episode in a show called The Book of Boba Fett, where an entire episode was dedicated to Mando and no one else. So why is Boba Fett even in the show at this point? In fact, Boba Fett, Tamara Morrison, was completely absent from his own show. So what was the fucking point? Why couldn't they just make that the beginning of Mandalorian season 3? Centering an episode on a character who is not the titular antihero in order to further the story is not that wild of an idea. It was done in The Mandalorian several times, including an episode focusing on Ahsoka Tano, played by Rosario Dawson, though Mando was never completely absent. Yeah, that episode with Ahsoka Tano was basically a backdoor pilot for the Ahsoka series. This Boba Fett episode was great, arguably the best of the season, which has been rocky for some fans with the focus on the character's new storyline as a mob boss, rather than the most feared and mysterious bounty hunter in the galaxy. Directed by Bryce Dallas Howard and written by series creator Jon Favreau, Chapter 5, Return of the Mandalorian, left some fans with unexpected feelings of guilt and an overall sense of being bummed out that the great Boba Fett needed to be upstaged to make the series more enjoyable. And it seemed like the entire situation is going to be exacerbated, as all signs from the episode point to the return of Grogu, a.k.a. Baby Yoda. There was also speculation that Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill, may even show up again, as he did in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, further making the title character of the Disney Plus series, and one of the most beloved in the Star Wars franchise, seem almost insignificant. And you make him insignificant in his own show. Talk about completely disrespecting the character. And finally, guys, then we get opinion pieces coming out. Now, this coming out from a few days ago, but I completely agree with this, is the fact that, Boba Fett is too much J.J. Abrams Star Wars and too little Mandalorian. The Book of Boba Fett has struggled so far, and part of the problem is its Star Wars fan service, which echoes J.J. Abrams' sequel movies. Disney Plus's The Book of Boba Fett has a problem with its fan service, which feels more in line with that of J.J. Abrams' 2 Star Wars sequels than it does the show it more directly spins out of, The Mandalorian. The very idea of a show based on Boba Fett is, of course, to some degree just fan service. He is, after all, someone who existed for several decades as more cool concept than character, which meant his greatest exploits, at least in the old expanded universe, were literally being written by fans. And guys, you have to keep in mind that Boba Fett in the original trilogy, if you count the Wilhelm scream that he gave in Return of the Jedi, only had 5 lines of dialogue over 2 movies, and that was it. The Book of Boba Fett shattered that in the first fucking episode. But the way the Book of Boba Fett has handled this aspect alongside storytelling troubles has caused some issues that recall mistakes made throughout the Disney Star Wars era. As a base idea, fan service is not inherently good or bad, and I do agree with that. Fan service in and of itself is not entirely good, but it's also not entirely bad. It depends on how you handle it. Yeah, it depends on execution. There is little wrong with the notion of wanting to give fans something designed to please them. In a sense, that's surely part of the aim of making any movie or show, but it needs to be ingrained in, or at the very least supported by strong characterization, world building, and great storytelling. There's nothing wrong with fan expectations going into a franchise, by the way. You know, it's a good idea to give the fans what they want to a degree. Alright, there's always that to a degree. You can't give them everything that they want. You know, and then you have to still make the show, different enough, that way it doesn't feel insignificant. It doesn't feel like, you know, what the fuck am I watching this for? And I mean, a perfect example is look at that Solo: A Star Wars Story. What was actually in that movie that you didn't already know about Han Solo? That pretty much made that movie feel rather insignificant, and all of the interesting stuff like Dryden Voss being the villain was hardly in the movie. And it's like, okay, you have Dryden Voss, the Crimson Dawn, and then you have Kira being a femme fatale, but all that stuff plays second fiddle to the Kessel Run, and how Han Solo met Chewie, and how he won the Millennium Falcon. You know, that was the real problem with Solo. Anyway, I'm tangenting on for too long. It's an issue apparent in both Star Wars: The Force Awakens and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker in particular, which trade in those elements for simple nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia and a bounty of references, and it's an issue being seen again in the Book of Boba Fett. Throughout the Book of Boba Fett's episodes, there's been a lot of fan service with some on-the-nose Easter eggs, references to the past, and scenes and stories that seemingly exist simply because they're related to that thing you know. This is to varying degrees part of all Star Wars movies and shows, but the Book of Boba Fett's storytelling problems, which has led to the show being called boring among other criticisms, means it feels more and more like it relies on nods to the past, nostalgia, and perhaps upcoming cameos. Rather than underpinning the story, they simply displace it, giving fan service in place of a narrative. This was a major failing of Abrams' Rise of Skywalker, which brought Emperor Palpatine back out of fucking nowhere, might I add you. There was nothing in episode 7 or 8 that even hinted at Palpatine's return, and then all of a sudden, episode 9, Emperor Palpatine comes back, and you think it would be a spoiler? No, it's not only in the opening crawl, it's in the first 5 minutes of the fucking movie. Anyway, I tangented off for too long, which brought Emperor Palpatine back, tried to quote-unquote fix divisive elements of Star Wars: The Last Jedi to appease audiences who disliked it, and crammed in as many references and cameos as possible. The Book of Boba Fett isn't quite that bad just yet, and while there are plenty of differences between this and Abrams' Star Wars movies, the fan service is where it falls down. Already in the Book of Boba Fett, viewers have seen the story of his escape from the Sarlacc, relive parts of The Mandalorian, witness Boba Fett meet with the Hutts and get a pet Rancor, explaining a moment from Return of the Jedi that was already pretty apparent, shown him fighting a General Grievous mimicking chef droid, covered enough grains of Tatooine sand dunes to never want to see the planet again, and had a Wookiee rip a man's arm off because, hey, Han Solo said it could happen over 40 years ago. It's also seemingly setting up a potential cameo from the Mandalorian himself, Din Djarin. Spoiler alert, it already fucking happened. Which would highlight the show's failings and how much better its predecessor has accomplished a similar goal. Oh, this author here, you could call him Nostradamus. The Mandalorian is similarly packed with fan service, but it's the kind that's done right. Its Easter eggs and nostalgia exist not to just service the fans, but the story. Everything there feels organic, and even if it was removed, the narrative and character work remains great. Cameos from the like of Ahsoka Tano and Luke Skywalker are fan service, but they're also natural for the timeline and the story being told. Well, I would still claim that Ahsoka Tano episode was effectively just a backdoor pilot for the Ahsoka Tano series coming up. Anyway, where was I? And even if you swap them with characters people don't know, there'd still be an effective story there, and that I'll give you. Or put another way, The Mandalorian works brilliantly whether a person has followed Star Wars since 1977, or if it's the first part of the franchise they've ever watched. The same couldn't be said for Abrams' Star Wars, more so The Rise of Skywalker than The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is more a remake of A New Hope, whether you like it or not. And it can't be said for the Book of Boba Fett either, which rely on a wave of nostalgia and the use of familiar iconography and settings to garner investment, rather than anything compelling in its own plot or character arcs. It's particularly curious this is happening in the latter of those, when much of its character development for the eponymous former bounty hunter is more like anti-fan service, removing everything cool about Boba Fett in an attempt to give him an arc that isn't what anyone would have expected. Ah, oh, damn it. Unfortunately, it's done at the expense of an interesting story, meaning all that's left are cameos, references, and fan service that doesn't fully deliver. You know, and you know your show is bad when your main actor even agrees that he talks way too fucking much. You know, part of what made Boba Fett like so cool was the fact that you pretty much knew nothing about him. He was just kind of there. But now that you've pulled back the curtain, you know, Wizard of Oz, you know, you've now seen that man behind the curtain. You've seen Boba Fett for who he really is. There's no going back. You know, you cannot undo this damage. I would rather them just keep Boba Fett mysterious than give him his own show. He should have just been a side character in other people's shows if we're just being entirely honest here. You know, and I can guarantee you that many of you guys feel the same way. If you actually like the Book of Boba Fett, let me know down below why you actually like the Book of Boba Fett, because there might be something to the show that you're gravitating toward that, you know, that maybe I'm just not seeing. Again, I gave up on this show after the very first episode because I saw what they were doing. They were basically destroying Boba Fett. You know, they were destroying the mystique of the character, and like I just said 30 seconds ago, you know, once you pull back the curtain, once you reveal that man behind the curtain, there's no going back. And guys, that's pretty much all I got for you before I drag this out for way longer than it needs to be. So if you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.